Satanism, the feared religion. When Anton Szandor LaVey shaved his head and created the Church of Satan on April 30th, 1966, he knew that soon he would be the focal point of attention for people throughout the globe. Now that we have passed the 40th anniversary of that fateful night, has the world begun to understand the real meaning behind the only organized religion in history to take as its symbol the ultimate figure of pride and rebellion, and to many, of evil? And are there truly some grounds for people to feel fear at the ever-growing phenomenon of contemporary Satanism? As the high priest of the Church of Satan, I can candidly say, yes. However, what the general populace has decided to fear is a ludicrous portrait that has been painted in lurid technicolor by media hypesters intent on titillation. Unscrupulous evangelists struggling to fill their coffers and keep their mistresses in jewelry, and most distressingly by a segment of the therapeutic community who has found a goldmine in the treatment of so-called ritual abuse survivors, who provide no evidence of their tales of terror, save for their fervent belief that they were victimized. These fictions are remarkably similar to stories told by women labeled by Freud as hysterics. I shall not waste time in refuting the absurd claim that there is an international conspiracy of generational Satanists bent on enslaving the world through drug use and the sacrifice of babies bred for their purpose by emotionally unstable women. That mythology has been thoroughly exploded by other sources. Let us instead look at contemporary Satanism for what it really is. A religion of elitism and social Darwinism, that seeks to re-establish the reign of the able over the idiotic, of swift justice over sluggish injustice, and for a wholesale rejection of egalitarianism as a myth that has crippled the advancement of the human species for the last 2,000 years. Is that something to fear? If you're one of the majority of human mediocrities merely existing as a media-besotted drone, you bet it is. The philosophy of Satanism is delineated in the writings of Anton Szandor LaVey. His books include the Satanic Bible, the Satanic Rituals, the Satanic Witch, the Devil's Notebook, and Satan Speaks. All are currently in print and should be consulted by anyone interested in a complete picture of the views held by the Church of Satan. One can obtain further information by reading The Secret Life of a Satanist, the authorized biography of Anton LaVey, and The Church of Satan, two books by Blanche Barton, the biographer and longtime companion to Dr. LaVey, and a member of the Council of Nine. These works present abundant material regarding the history and contemporary practices of the Church of Satan. For those who have yet to study this literature, there are 3 sets of brief guidelines issued over the years by the Church, authored by LaVey, which can give the uninitiated a capsulized version of satanic philosophy. The first are the 9 Satanic Statements, which open the Satanic Bible and give a firm foundation for the Satanist. They are: Number 1. Satan represents indulgence instead of abstinence. Satan represents vital existence instead of spiritual pipe dreams. Satan represents undefiled wisdom instead of hypocritical self-deceit. Satan represents kindness to those who deserve it instead of love wasted on ingrates. Satan represents vengeance instead of turning the other cheek. Satan represents responsibility to the responsible instead of concern for psychic vampires. Satan represents man as just another animal, sometimes better, more often worse than those that walk on all fours, who, because of his divine, spiritual, and intellectual development, has become the most vicious animal of all. Satan represents all of the so-called sins, as they all lead to physical, mental, or emotional gratification. Satan has been the best friend the church has ever had, as he has kept it in business all these years. The next statements. The 11 satanic rules of the earth were written at about the same time, but were then considered too frank and brutal for general release, and issued only to the membership. Here is the Lex Satanicus, a law of the jungle for social interaction. Number one. Do not give opinions or advice unless you are asked. 2. Do not tell your troubles to others unless you are sure they want to hear them. 3. When in another's lair, show him respect, or else do not go there. 4. If a guest in your lair annoys you, treat him cruelly and without mercy. 5. Do not make sexual advances unless you are given the mating signal. 6. Do not take that which does not belong to you, unless it is a burden to the other person and he cries out to be relieved. 7. Acknowledge the power of magic if you have employed it successfully to obtain your desires. If you deny the power of magic after having called upon it with success, you will lose all you have obtained. 8. Do not complain about anything to which you need not subject yourself. 9. Do not harm little children. 10. Do not kill non-human animals unless you are attacked or for your food. 11. When walking in open territory, bother no one. If someone bothers you, ask him to stop. If he does not stop, destroy him. Does not stop, destroy him. Since we have been issuing statements of what we are seeking, it was considered time to make a list of behaviors that we wish to see avoided. Satanists acknowledge that we are human and work towards perfection, but can sometimes fall into negative patterns of action. Thus was born the list of the 9 Satanic Sins, guidelines for what Satanists consider to be non-productive behavior to be recognized and eliminated from one's daily existence. Number 1. Stupidity. The top of the list for Satanic Sins, the cardinal sin of Satanism. It's too bad that stupidity isn't painful. Ignorance is one thing, but our society thrives increasingly on stupidity. It depends on people going along with whatever they are told. The media promotes a cultivated stupidity as a posture that is not only acceptable but laudable. Satanists must learn to see through the tricks and cannot afford to be stupid. 2. Pretentiousness. Empty posturing can be most irritating and isn't applying the cardinal rules of lesser magic. On equal footing with stupidity for what keeps the money in circulation these days. Everyone's made to feel like a big shot, whether they can come up with the goods or not. Solipsism. Solipsism can be very dangerous for Satanists, projecting your reactions, responses, and sensibilities onto someone who is probably far less attuned than you are. It is the mistake of expecting people to give you the same consideration, courtesy, and respect that you naturally give them. They won't. Instead, Satanists must strive to apply the dictum, "Do unto others as they do unto you." It's work for the most of us and requires constant vigilance lest you slip into a comfortable illusion of everyone being like you. As has been said, certain utopias would be ideal in a nation of philosophers, but unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately from a Machiavellian standpoint, we are far from that point. 4. Self-deceit. It's in the 9 Satanic Statements, but deserves to be repeated here. Another cardinal sin. We must not pay homage to any of the sacred cows presented to us, including the roles we are expected to play ourselves. The only time self-deceit should be entered into is when it's fun and with awareness. But then, it's not self-deceit. 5. Herd conformity. That's obvious from a satanic stance. It's all right to conform to a person's wishes if it ultimately benefits you. But only fools follow along with the herd, letting an impersonal entity dictate you. The key is to choose a master wisely instead of being enslaved by the whims of the many. 6. Lack of perspective. Again, this one can lead to a lot of pain for a Satanist. You must never lose sight of who and what you are, and what a threat you can be by your very existence. We are making history right now. Every day, always keep the wider historical and social picture in mind. That is an important key to both lesser and greater magic. See the patterns and fit things together as you want the pieces to fall into place. Do not be swayed by herd constraints. Know that you are working on another level entirely from the rest of the world. 7. Forgetfulness past orthodoxies. Be aware that this is one of the keys to brainwashing people into accepting something new and different, when in reality it's something that was once widely accepted but is now presented in a new package. We are expected to rave about the genius of the creator and forget the original. This makes for a disposable society. 8. Counterproductive pride. That first word is important. Pride is great up to the point you begin to throw out the baby with the bathwater. The rule of Satanism is, if it works for you, great. When it stops working for you, when you've painted yourself into a corner, and the only way out is to say, "I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I wish we could compromise somehow." Then do it. 9. Lack of aesthetics. This is the physical application of the balance factor. Aesthetics is important in lesser magic and should be cultivated. It is obvious that no one can collect any money off classical standards of beauty and form most of the time, so they are discouraged in a consumer society. But an eye for beauty, for balance, is an essential satanic tool and must be applied for greatest magical effectiveness. It's not what's supposed to be pleasing, it's what is. Aesthetics is a personal thing, reflective of one's own nature, but there are universally pleasing and harmonious configurations that should not be denied. This material sums up the rudiments of satanic philosophy. It certainly has nothing to do with the prevailing Judeo-Christian outlook of altruism and self-sacrifice, and can thus seem quite alien and frightening to one brought up in that worldview. Realistically, the satanic code of behavior is based on human nature, as it is, and thus comes naturally to most carnal people who have not been deeply indoctrinated in anti-life and anti-rational belief systems. It is a fact that many people today call themselves Christians, but really have no clear concept as to what that philosophy fully entails, so they generally behave in a satanic fashion. We think that it is high time that this is recognized and that people call themselves what they truly are, not what is socially convenient for them. As you can see, there are no elements of devil worship in the Church of Satan. Such practices are looked upon as being Christian heresies. Believing in the Christian worldview of God versus the devil and choosing to side with the Prince of Darkness is pointless to the Satanists, as neither exists. Additionally, we do not believe in the supernatural. To the Satanist, he is his own God. Satan is a symbol of man, living as his prideful carnal nature dictates. Some Satanists extend this symbol to encompass the evolutionary force of entropy that permeates all of nature and provides the drive for survival and propagation inherent in all living things. Evolutionary force of entropy that permeates all of nature and provides the drive for survival and propagation inherent in all living things. To the Satanist, Satan is not a conscious entity to be worshipped. Rather, it is a name for the reservoir of power inside each human to be tapped at will. Thus, the practice of sacrifice is rejected by Satanists as being a Christian aberration. In Satanism, there is no deity to which one can make a sacrifice. Satanists do at times have experience of the supernormal in their practice of ritual or greater magic. This is a technique intended primarily as self-transformational psychodrama, but which may be used as an attempt towards influencing the outcome of human events to desired ends. In the context of a theatrical, stimulating ritual, an extreme emotional state is reached, sending forth a vision of what you want to occur, the is to be, which, if your levels of adrenaline are high enough, might permeate the unconscious minds of those you wish to influence, causing them to behave as you desire when the time is right. This does not mean that anything is possible, for it takes a great deal of energy to make a strong sending, and it is often difficult to influence events from the inertia of their present directions. Satanists consider that effective greater magic may be a talent, and that different individuals may have varying capacities for sending and receiving. Awareness of your abilities and what is possible to achieve is one of the hallmarks of a successful satanic magician. Additionally, Satanists do not use faith as a tool of cognition. Hence, there is no requirement to accept greater magic as anything more than self-therapy. It is up to each Satanist to examine any interesting coincidences following their rituals and, based on evidence, decide whether more is in motion. Satanists also practice lesser magic, which is basically the day-to-day manipulation of your fellows to obtain your ends. Detailed techniques are given in The Satanic Witch. In the recent past, we have seen certain evangelists and even misinformed academics calling Satanism a neo-Nazi movement. This is an inaccurate label. The Nazi movement drew much of its power from a racist doctrine of Aryan superiority. Satanism is far more discerning than that. While there are provable biological differences between the races and statistically demonstrable performance levels in various activities, it is quite irrational to think that someone can be advanced or not simply because of the color of their skin. Even if one comes from promising genetic stock, and by that we mean from ancestors who have proven their abilities to be superior in performance, this does not guarantee an individual's advancement. We recognize individual merit and ascribe no value to bloodlines. Satanists only deem individuals as being elite if they prove it by cultivating their naturally endowed abilities to the highest extent possible. This is something that requires the satanic virtue of discipline, a quality we try to instill in our own iron youth. There are thus outstanding individuals from all ethnic backgrounds, and they are embraced by Satanism for the superior beings that they are, creating a uniquely transcultural tribe of carnal people. Satanists treasure individualism, hardly something to be gained by goose-stepping en masse down the street. Yet we do not embrace an anything-goes atmosphere wherein all values are relative and nothing rises above the sludge of commonality. Satanism encourages a return to more traditional values in art and literature, such as mastery of technique and emotional communication, of form and function, design and execution. Satanists find a wealth of material in Western culture to be treasured for the pinnacle of human achievements that they are, and not to be buried under the swill of multiculturalist attempts to displace them with dubious achievements simply because they are non-Western, as has become rampant in some academic and artistic circles. We call to each individual to seek human greatness wherever it can be found, from the vaults of history and from the talented producers of the present, and to deride the trendy shams for the shallow facades that they are. Since Satanism stands for acceptance of man as an animal, there have often been creators in many past cultures who embraced this insight and explored it in the context of their society. Thus, Satanists seek out these artistic and philosophical expressions and see them to be the roots of our current awareness of our human type. Satanists see the social structure of humanity as being stratified. Thus, each person reaches a level commensurate with the development or lack thereof of their natural talents. The principle of the survival of the strong is advocated on all levels of society, from allowing an individual to stand or fall, then letting those nations that cannot handle themselves take the consequences of this inability. Any assistance on all levels should be on a quid pro quo basis. There would be a concomitant reduction in the world's population as the weak are allowed to experience the consequences of social Darwinism if this rationale and just principle were put into operation. Thus has nature always acted to cleanse and strengthen her children. This is harsh, but that is the way of the world. We embrace reality and do not try to transform it into some utopia that is contrary to the very fabric of existence. Practical application of this doctrine would see the complete cessation of welfare systems, an end to no-string-attached foreign aid, and new programs to award and encourage gifted individuals in all fields to pursue personal excellence. A meritocracy would replace the practice of such injustices as affirmative action and other programs designed to punish the able and reward the undeserving. The natural generosity of some of the successful and affluent would not be curtailed, but it would not be state-mandated. Satanists also seek to enhance the laws of nature by concentrating on fostering the practice of eugenics. This is not some exotic doctrine hatched in the brains of Third Reich medical madmen. It is the practice of encouraging people of talent and ability to reproduce, to enrich the gene pool from which our species can grow. This was commonly practiced throughout the world, as even a text on eugenics endorsed by the Women's Christian Temperance Union proves, until it was given a bad name by Nazi excesses. Until the genetic code is fully manipulable, and we can choose the character of our offspring at will, Satanists seek to mate the best with the best. Satanists who know that they can pass on genetic defects would refrain from reproducing. Again, this is a practice that is a personal option, not a governmentally enforced dictate. Most Satanists are particularly disgusted by the extraordinary level of criminal activity that abounds today. Thus they advocate a return to the Roman lex talionis. Lex talionis, let the punishment fit in kind and degree the crime. To achieve this, we would be pleased to see the institution of an elite police force of men and women in peak physical and mental condition, trained in advanced techniques of crime fighting, who would be ably equipped to handle the vermin that makes so many of our cities into little more than concrete jungles. Man is by nature a social creature and makes his social contract with his fellows. Thus, rules of conduct are established to allow maximum freedom for individuals to interact. Disobey those rules and punishment must be swift and sure, and most probably public as well. This does not mean the incarceration of individuals in institutions at the expense of the victims for so-called rehabilitation. No, these criminals should be put to some use, perhaps as forced labor to even clean up the environment that has so carelessly been soiled under the dominance of Christian spiritual philosophy that sees man as superior to other living creatures, with a God-given right to abuse them at will. Man is an animal, must go back to acting like one, not soiling his own lair as only twisted humans do. The Church of Satan pursues a 5-point plan to move society in directions that are considered to be beneficial to Satanists.